Murph is mile run, 100 ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats and mile run. No way I can do any of that, unless breaking it in sets. 33 sets of 3 pull-ups, 6 push-ups and 9 squats. And you walk 100 meters during a set between the exercises. But admittedly, a Morphed Murph is pretty much a Cindy. Audio during workout is frags of Asimov, Céline, Cervantès, Dante, Dostoïevski, Bulgakov, Kropotkine, Schopenhauer, David Graeber, Rousseau, Scott Fitzgerald. Audio of this video is from the dawn of everything. Video is x16, actual length of workout is 2 hours and something.
Interacted with one another, interbred, drifted apart and came together, mostly in ways we can still only guess at. It seems reasonable to assume that behaviors like mating and child-rearing practices, the presence or absence of dominance hierarchies or forms of language and proto-language must have varied at least as much as physical types, and probably far more. Perhaps the only thing we can say with real certainty is that, in terms of ancestry, we are all Africans. Modern humans first appeared in Africa. When they began expanding out of Africa into Eurasia, they encountered other populations, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans. Less different, but still different, and these various groups interbred. Only after those other populations became extinct can we really begin talking about a single human us inhabiting the planet. What all this brings home is just how radically different the social and even physical world of our remote ancestors would have seemed to us, and this would have been true at least down to around 40,000 BC. The range of flora and fauna surrounding them was quite unlike anything that exists today, all of which makes it extremely difficult to draw analogies. There's simply nothing in the historical or ethnographic record that resembles a situation in which different subspecies of human interbred, interacted, cooperated, but sometimes also killed each other. And if there were, the archaeological evidence is too thin and sporadic to test whether remote prehistory was really anything like that or not. The only thing we can reasonably infer about social organization among our earliest ancestors is that it's likely to have been extraordinarily diverse. Early humans inhabited a wide range of natural environments, from coastlands and tropical forest to mountains and savanna. They were far, far more physically diverse than humans are today, and presumably their social differences were even greater than their physical ones. In other words, there is no original form of human society. Searching for one can only be a matter of myth-making, whether the resultant myths take the form of killer ape fantasies that emerged in the 1960s, seared into collective consciousness by movies like Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, or The Aquatic Ape, or even the highly amusing but fanciful Stoned Ape, the theory that consciousness emerged from the accidental ingestion of psychedelic mushrooms. Myths like these entertain YouTube watchers to this day. We should be clear, there's nothing wrong with myths. Likely as not, the tendency to make up stories about the distant past as a way of reflecting on the nature of our species is itself, like art and poetry, one of those distinctly human traits that began to crystallize in deep prehistory. And no doubt some of these stories, for instance, feminist theories that see distinctly human sociability as originating in collective child-rearing practices, can indeed tell us something important about the paths that converged in modern humanity. But such insights can only ever be partial, because there was no Garden of Eden, and a single Eve never existed. Why the sapient paradox is a red herring. As soon as we were human, we started doing human things. Human beings today are a fairly uniform species. This uniformity is not, in evolutionary terms, particularly old. Its genetic basis was established around 500,000 years ago, but it is almost certainly misguided to think we could ever specify a single more recent point in time when Homo sapiens emerged. That is, when all the various elements of the modern human condition converged definitively in some stupendous moment of creation. Consider the first direct evidence of what we'd now call complex symbolic human behavior, or simply culture. Currently, it dates back no more than 100,000 years. Where exactly on the African continent this evidence for culture crops up is determined largely by conditions of preservation, and by the countries that have so far been most accessible for archaeological investigation. Rock shelters around the coastlands of South Africa are a key source, trapping prehistoric sediments that yield evidence of hafted tools and the expressive use of shell and ochre around 80,000 BC. Comparably ancient finds are also known from other parts of Africa, but it's not until later, around 45,000 years ago, by which time our species was busily colonizing Eurasia, that similar evidence starts appearing much more widely and in greater quantities. In the 1980s and 1990s, it was widely assumed that something profound happened, some kind of sudden creative efflorescence around 45,000 years ago, variously referred to in the literature as the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, or even the Human Revolution. But in the last 2 decades, it has become increasingly clear to researchers that this is most likely an illusion created by biases in our evidence. Here's why. Much of the evidence for this revolution is restricted to a single part of the world, Europe, where it is associated with the replacement of Neanderthals by Homo sapiens around 40,000 BC. It includes more advanced toolkits for hunting and handicrafts, the first clear evidence for the making of images in bone, ivory, and clay, including the famous sculpted female figurines, dense clusters of carved and painted animal figures in caves, often observed with breathtaking accuracy, more elaborate ways of clothing and decorating the human body, the first attested use of musical instruments like bone flutes, regular exchange of raw materials over great distances, and also what are usually taken as the earliest proofs of social inequality in the form of grand burials. All this is impressive and gives the impression of a lack of synchrony between the ticking of our genetic and cultural clocks. It seems to ask the question, why do so many tens of thousands of years stand between the biological origins of humanity and the widespread appearance of typically human forms of behavior? Between when we became capable of creating culture and when we finally got round to doing it? What were we actually doing in the interim? Many researchers have puzzled over